Imagine conditioning a baby to fear fluffy, white animals for the rest of his life. That's exactly what psychologist John B. Watson did in his 1920 experiment. In the early 20th century, the field of psychology was still very much in its infancy. John B. Watson, a psychologist and a pioneer of behaviorism, embarked on an experiment that would go down in history as one of the most ethically questionable psychological studies ever conducted. Watson and his graduate student, Rosalie Rayner, selected a 9-month-old baby for their experiment. The child, referred to as Little Albert, was chosen because he was stolid and unemotional, showing no fear of anything. The researchers then set out to condition Little Albert to fear a white rat. Initially, Albert showed no fear of the rat, but Watson and Rayner paired the sight of the rat with a loud, startling noise, causing Albert to cry and exhibit fear. Over time, the mere sight of the rat was enough to make Albert cry and try to crawl away. The conditioning was so strong that Albert began to fear not just the rat, but other white, fluffy objects as well. Even a Santa Claus mask with a white cotton beard elicited fear in the child. The most chilling part? Watson and Rayner never obtained consent from Albert's mother, who was a wet nurse at the hospital where Watson conducted his research. And as far as we know, they never attempted to decondition Albert's fear. The Little Albert experiment was a landmark study in classical conditioning and the power of the environment in shaping behavior. But it also serves as a stark reminder of the ethical considerations that must guide psychological research. No scientific discovery, no matter how groundbreaking, can justify causing harm or distress to a subject, especially a child. This experiment raises serious ethical questions about informed consent and the long-term effects of psychological experiments on their subjects. It's a haunting tale from the annals of psychology, one that underscores the importance of ethical guidelines in research. In 1939, a group of orphans were subjected to psychological torment to prove a hypothesis about stuttering. This is the chilling premise of what's now known as the Monster Study, conducted by Wendell Johnson and his graduate student, Mary Tudor. These two researchers from the University of Iowa had a deep interest in speech disorders, but their mere methods of investigation were far from ethical. The Monster Study involved 22 orphaned children who were divided into two groups. One group was given positive speech therapy, where children were praised for their fluency. The other group, however, received negative speech therapy. This involved harsh criticism of each child's speech, including every minor mistake or hesitation. What Johnson and Tudor wanted to understand was whether stuttering could be induced in individuals who previously showed no signs of a speech disorder. And to their shock, or maybe not, the results were devastating. The children in the negative therapy group started to show significant signs of speech disturbances. They became extremely self-conscious, hesitant, and began to stutter, effectively proving Johnson and Tudor's hypothesis. But the damage didn't stop there. The effects of this cruel experiment persisted long into the children's adulthood, leading to lifelong psychological trauma and speech problems. The experiment was so unethical that it was kept hidden for several decades until it was exposed in the late 20th century. This study, despite its horrifying methods, did contribute to our understanding of stuttering and the impact of negative reinforcement. It underlined the destructive potential of persistent criticism and the importance of positive reinforcement in learning. However, it also stands as a stark reminder of the ethical boundaries that must never be crossed in research. The Monster Study is a dark chapter in the history of psychology, one that emphasizes the need to protect vulnerable populations, like children, and especially orphans, from being exploited in the name of science. The Monster Study shows us the potentially devastating effects of negative reinforcement and the importance of protecting vulnerable populations in research. It is a tale we need to remember, so we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. How far would you go if an authority figure told you to? In Stanley Milgram's 1963 experiment, the answer was disturbingly far. This groundbreaking psychological study, one of the most well-known in history, sought to investigate the conflict between obedience to authority and personal conscience. Milgram, a psychologist at Yale University, was intrigued by the question, Could it be that Eichmann and his million accomplices in the Holocaust were just following orders? In the experiment, participants were told they were part of a learning memory test. They were assigned the role of a teacher, with another person acting as a learner. The learner was in a separate room, and the teacher was instructed to administer electric shocks every time the learner gave a wrong answer. The shocks were not real, but the participants didn't know that. With each incorrect answer, the shock level was increased. The learners, in reality actors, would express discomfort and eventually scream in pain. But when the teachers hesitated, an authority figure in the room would urge them to continue, saying it was crucial for the experiment. The results were chilling. A vast majority, about 2/3 of the participants, continued to administer shocks, escalating to the highest levels, even when they believed they were causing severe harm. They were visibly distressed, yet they obeyed the authority figure, contradicting the common belief that only a small fraction of people would commit harmful acts under orders. The Milgram experiment revealed a dark side of human nature. It showed us that ordinary people could inflict harm on others when instructed by an authority figure, challenging the idea that only inherently evil individuals could commit atrocities. What the experiment truly highlighted is the frightening power of authority and the unsettling lengths people are willing to go to obey it, even when it conflicts with their personal morals and values. The Milgram experiment challenges our perceptions of personal responsibility and the power of authority. In 1971, a mock prison in the basement of Stanford University became the stage for one of the most infamous psychological experiments in history. This was the Stanford Prison Experiment, a study that would push the boundaries of ethical research and shed a disturbing light on the human capacity for cruelty. Psychology professor Philip Zimbardo led the experiment, which involved 24 volunteer college students. These students were randomly assigned to play the roles of either prisoners or guards in a simulated prison environment. The aim was to investigate the psychological effects of perceived power and the dynamic between prisoners and prison officers. However, the experiment quickly spiraled out of control. The guards began to display sadistic tendencies, subjecting the prisoners to psychological torture, including humiliation, sleep deprivation, and solitary confinement. It was as if they had completely absorbed their roles, forgetting the reality of the situation. On the other side of the bars, the prisoners, too, seemed to forget they were part of an experiment. They started to show signs of severe emotional distress and trauma. Some even started to believe they were actual prisoners, trapped in a real prison. What's even more disturbing is the lack of intervention from the experimenters. Despite clear signs of distress, they allowed the experiment to continue. It was only stopped after 6 days, though it was initially intended to last for 2 weeks. An external observer, horrified by the conditions and treatment, finally convinced Zimbardo to put an end to it. The Stanford Prison Experiment has been heavily criticized for its ethical issues, including the mental harm caused to the participants. It's a stark reminder of the potential dangers and power of situational forces on human behavior. It also underscores the importance of ethical guidelines in research to prevent such harm. The Stanford Prison Experiment reminds us of the thin line between role play and reality, and the responsibility of researchers to intervene when experiments go too far. It stands as a haunting testament of how easily normal individuals can become engrossed in a role, leading them to act in ways they would never normally consider. These experiments, chilling as they are, have shaped our understanding of human behavior and the mind. The Little Albert experiment, for instance, gave us insight into how fear can be conditioned in humans, but at the cost of one infant's psychological well-being. The monster study, on the other hand, highlighted the profound impact that negative reinforcement can have on a child's speech development. Again, the ethical costs were significant, with the children involved suffering long-term consequences. The Milgram experiment brought to light the disturbing truth about human obedience to authority. It revealed that people are capable of inflicting harm on others when instructed by an authority figure, a concept which has far-reaching implications in understanding human behavior in various contexts. Yet, the emotional distress caused to the participants was undeniable. Similarly, the Stanford prison experiment exposed the dark side of power dynamics and de-individuation in a simulated prison scenario. Despite its important findings, it was heavily criticized for its lack of ethical considerations, pushing the participants to their psychological limits. Together, these experiments have had a profound impact on the field of psychology. They've revealed uncomfortable truths about the human mind and behavior, but they've also highlighted the importance of conducting research ethically. These studies played a significant role in the development of modern research ethics and laws. They've led to the establishment of essential ethical guidelines, such as obtaining informed consent, ensuring participant well-being, and the right to withdraw from a study at any point. They've emphasized the importance of conducting research in a manner that values the dignity and welfare of participants above all else. Furthermore, they've taught us that the pursuit of knowledge should never justify causing harm to others. They've underscored the need for researchers to carefully consider the potential consequences of their studies and to prioritize ethical considerations over scientific curiosity. As we delve deeper into the human mind, it's crucial we remember these lessons from the past, ensuring that research is conducted ethically and with the well-being of participants at the forefront.